you for choosing this training video as part of your quest for more knowledge and expertise in combating human trafficking. I am Professor Rosa Patti. Our Human Trafficking Academy has designed these training videos to benefit law enforcement, legal professionals, educators, healthcare professionals, religious organizations, and the community at large. The experts featured in them dig deeper into the efforts made by the government, the public sector, and civil society working together in partnership to raise awareness about trafficking in human beings, to assess and address the root causes that make people vulnerable, to understand the intricate structure of the crime and the modus operandi of its perpetrators, to curb the demand of this billions of dollars illicit industry, to identify, rescue, and protect the victims and their families, and above all, to rehabilitate our society and steer it towards a more ethical and compassionate coexistence. Trafficking in human beings, modern-day slavery, is the worst affront to the dignity of the human person. It's an infamy that poisons the human society. But it does not have to accompany us perpetually. We can and should put an end to it. This is our lifetime trial, and we are never tried beyond our strengths. And now I invite you to hear from those who are at the forefront of eradicating this human-by-human exploitation and have made combating trafficking their life's most noble cause.
Human trafficking is essentially modern-day slavery. It's about exploitation. And there are many different forms of human trafficking, and it's a very complex crime, but it is, in short, modern-day slavery.
The legal definition of human trafficking in the United States at the federal level differentiates between sex trafficking and labor exploitation or labor trafficking. The definition of sex trafficking involves the inducement of someone, male or female, to perform a commercial sex act through the force or the defrauding or the coercion of that individual, except when that individual is under 18 years old. When we talk about trafficking and the definition of trafficking in the context of labor, we looked at the inducement, procurement of that individual for the service, the labor, through the use of force, fraud, or coercion, irrespective of the age of the individual being enslaved or trafficked.
The difference between human trafficking and smuggling is that trafficking is about exploitation. We're focused on the exploitation and not the transportation of people.
A human smuggling violation is normally an agreement between two or more people to bring somebody into the country, violating that country's immigration laws. Trafficking is, again, an act that can occur within the United States or within a country once a person arrives, in which commercial sex or labor is forced on them. We do have a serious problem in the state of Florida, especially in South Florida. People ask me, why South Florida? And we are just a location in which these type of violations are ripe to occur. We have beautiful weather. We have tourism, the tourism industry, which brings about restaurants, clubs, hotels. We also have agriculture in this area. We have major events that take place in South Florida, sporting events, and all of these combined together make South Florida, a mecca for trafficking violations.
Florida keeps being ranked among the three top states in regards to the number of human trafficking cases and victims identified. We've seen a variety of cases, including individuals being forced to work as domestic servants inside homes, women who've been forced into servile marriages, individuals such as migrant workers forced to pick crops along our fields, others who've worked in hotels and different service industries, hidden amongst the everyday customer who comes in to and pays for services. And we've seen young girls and women who've been forced to work in brothels along South Florida.
Human trafficking is very is a very complex crime because it is so difficult to detect, and finding victims of trafficking can be very challenging. The victims in those types of cases are always similar in that they're vulnerable, in that they're in positions where they are exploited because they have, because of their circumstances, they have a lack of power. They have, perhaps if they're here illegally, they have a lot of things that can be used against them to exploit them.
In order to categorize someone as a victim of trafficking, we need to identify whether that person that is in a situation of working against his or her will are able to leave that situation. And it's a very subjective assessment. We looked at the whole context of the life of this individual and how the person has been recruited, what are the conditions under what they are performing the work or the service, whether they can walk away of that employment and not receive any serious consequences to their life, either physical consequence, negative consequence, or psychological harm to that individual. But again, it's very subjective. Can we look at the particular situation from the perspective of the interviewer? No. We need to understand the whole context of that person's life to be able to say whether the person is a victim of trafficking or not.
Some of the general indicators of somebody who has been either sexually exploited and or a victim of human trafficking is a person may be, or a young girl may be young, but say that they're older. That's common. Many times they don't have any documentation, like their identification and or papers saying who they are. They don't have personal possession of. A third party will have personal possession of those documents, or there won't be any documents at all. Sometimes they appear to be and are malnourished. They don't have enough to eat. You can see signs of psychological damage, physical bruises, cuts, scars, things of that nature. We know that captors beat their victims into submission. Many times they don't know their location or they don't know the area where they are, and that's because they are transient and they are moved from city to city, state to state, and sometimes country to country.
They're not free to speak. Whenever they're asked a question, somebody speaks for them, or they look to somebody for that assistance. A lot of times if it's a foreign language, they will have a translator that's translating for them, but you can tell that they don't meet your eyes whenever they're answering or talking to you. Psychological abuse is a major contributing factor in a lot of our human trafficking investigations.
One of the main questions is, have you tried to leave your place of employment? Have you talked to your employer and said, I am not happy with the conditions of my employment. I would like to get paid. I would like to have more days off, and then see what is the response from the employer. If the individual says, yes, I have tried to leave and I've been told that I have to continue working or performing the service, or else something bad is going to happen to me, then we can say pretty much that this person is in a situation of slavery or trafficking.
When a victim is rescued or identified, the priority is taking care of the victim and his or her needs. And if there are multiple victims, that can be a huge undertaking. And then we talk about, okay, who needs to be contacted? Who are the advocates? Now that we have the victim covered, what do we do about the trafficker? And that's the next thing that comes into play. If a victim is a foreign victim, there are absolutely protections for them. And it's certainly, I think, expected and understandable that a foreign victim may be hesitant or unwilling to talk to law enforcement.
Once we determine that a foreign national here in the United States, whether they are here in a legal or illegal status, if we determine that they are a victim of human trafficking, they are afforded temporary immigration relief, which is called continued presence. It allows that victim a temporary immigration status while they're working with law enforcement. A local law enforcement agency that believes they have a trafficking victim can reach out to their ICE HSI, their local office, and ask to speak to the person that handles their continued presence requests. It just requires, very simple paperwork, fingerprints and photos, but the continued presence gives them that legal status while they're assisting the investigation, and it also gives them an employment authorization document, which allows them to work legally.
We can divide the legal interventions or protections for victims of human trafficking in categories. Initially, we would like to talk about the protections for those survivors or victims who are undocumented or in some form their immigration status is at risk due to the trafficking, perhaps. In those cases, the legal system allows for that individual to remain in the United States legally through different mechanisms. Short-term mechanism that we call continued presence, and a long-term mechanism called the T visa or the U visa, and eventually those individuals could become residents or United States citizens if they do desire. Tied to that comes the additional protection of having access to public benefits when they need it. They're also entitled to protections related to the criminal process, and that is uniform to anyone, whether they are from another country or they were born in the United States. So through the legal process against the trafficker, the victim is eligible to receive restitution. They're also entitled to present their statement in court, their victim statement, and have a say through that on the duration of the sentence of the trafficker. Everyone also, whether they are from another country or born in the United States, they are eligible to access the civil protections. And the Victims of Trafficking and Violence Protection Act and its reauthorizations have opened the doors to some claims under civil law that involves specifically the acts that are considered human trafficking. When we provide legal representation to survivors of human trafficking, we find ourselves in the need to step out of our traditional training as attorneys. We have to reach out to law enforcement.
Think outside of the box. When you think about trafficking, you have to know that exploitation of people can take many forms, and we have to be able to think outside the box and respond the way that the traffickers do, which is they do whatever they have to do to get it done, to exploit these people, whether it's for money or whatever reason. And for prosecutors and investigators, I think we have to think outside the box and be a step ahead of them in order to really combat it, and I think in an effective way.